Hey everybody, today I'm going to explain how to get your external synths up and running inside Ableton. This video is going to cover recording audio and MIDI from your synthesizer, and we'll briefly dive into the ways you can use your synth inside the program. I'll post a follow-up video that goes into greater detail on that topic. The first thing is to connect your synth in your computer. This usually involves connecting both audio and MIDI cables, although most synths these days can send MIDI over USB. Now, I'm sure most of you are already familiar with MIDI, but for the beginner, MIDI is just a fancy acronym for the way in which synths, other synths, and computers transmit and receive information. Consult your manual to see how your synth transmits MIDI and make the appropriate connections. Some devices, like most of Roland's Boutique line, transmits both audio and MIDI over micro USB, so once you plug that in, you're good to go. In most cases, though, you will also need to connect an audio cable from your synth to an audio interface that's connected to your computer using a 1/4 inch cable. Next, download any drivers that exist for your synth. They can be found on the manufacturer's website on the corresponding product page. You can also find any firmware updates here. Some synths don't require this step, but it's good to check to avoid troubleshooting later. Once drivers are installed, open Ableton and you should be able to view your device in Preferences under the Link MIDI tab. On this page, you can select settings for how MIDI is transmitted between Ableton and your device. Notice there is both an input and an output section. Here you can tell Ableton to listen to MIDI messages from your synth on the input and vice versa on the output. Having the ability to silence MIDI data can be useful for preventing interference in MIDI loops. The middle button sync is worth noting too. If your synth is equipped with an onboard arpeggiator or sequencer, you can use sync options for synchronizing Ableton's clock with the synth or vice versa. With input sync enabled, Ableton will be slave to the device's clock and start and stop buttons. Conversely, with output sync activated, the device will be slave to Ableton's clock and start and stop. Alright, it's time to record our synth's audio into Ableton. Go to the Audio tab in Preferences, and at the top, you will see Audio Input Device. You want to be sure that your input is the audio interface your synth is connected to. Double check that all of the inputs for your interface are activated by going to the Input Config menu right underneath the Input and Output sections and turning them on. Next, make a new MIDI track by right-clicking and selecting Insert MIDI Track or by hitting Shift-Command-T. Navigate to the Instruments drop-down on the left and grab an external instrument and drop it in the track. Now we're going to configure Ableton to listen on the appropriate inputs. Select the external instrument box and find your instrument in the MIDI 2 dropdown. If you plug MIDI cables into your audio interface instead of using USB, then select the audio interface in this MIDI 2 box instead. Check and see which input you used to plug in your synth and select that input in the Audio From dropdown below. If nothing shows up here, double check your inputs are activated in Input Config Settings in the Audio tab of Preferences. With the appropriate dropdown selected and the track activated, you should now be able to play notes on your instrument and hear it through the output. It seems dumb, but be sure your synth's volume is turned up and the VCA envelope is letting signal pass through. You can arm this track and record any MIDI notes you play from the synth by hitting the record button and playing some notes. You can also hit play on a MIDI clip and the MIDI should be fed to your synth, which you should be able to hear. To record this audio, you can have a second track whose input is from your external synths track. First, go to the input box next to the channel name and select the external instrument track you set up earlier. Now arm this track, deactivate it, and hit record while highlighting a MIDI clip. The audio from the MIDI clip should be recorded into this new track. Hopefully this video was helpful for you all. If so, don't forget to like it and hit the subscribe button below. The next post will cover ways to use external synths inside Ableton. Thanks. Till next time.